Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Laguna, and I'm a graduate student at the University of New Orleans. Today, I have prepared a lecture on the portrayal of the American Revolution in popular culture. I would like to begin with a definition of popular culture, but that seems difficult to come by. In the words of a pop culture historian, scholars of popular culture and cultural studies have taken a certain, perhaps perverse pride in not defining their subject. However, there are three themes that most academics agree on. So, first, popular culture is often described as the leftovers of high culture. When I say high culture, think of ballet, classical music, and fine art forms that require a certain level of training and abide by a set of rules. Whatever forms of art do not fall into this category are considered popular. Second, popular culture is often coupled with consumption. There needs to be a transaction between the artist and the audience. Capitalistic economies tend to produce a popular culture, a reflection of public spending habits. Thirdly, the product must reach a wide audience. Academics are hesitant to set a threshold at which point something becomes popular. Is it 100,000 people, a million? What is clear is that the product must be pervasive. For our purposes today, I have developed a definition of popular culture, which will be the mass consumption of a set of generally available artifacts. Now I would like to define the revolutionary narrative. Historian Andrew Sackett claims that there are two distinct perspectives or paradigms that are commonly used to tell the narrative of the American Revolution, and he is not alone. This terminology is pervasive throughout historical discourse on the Revolution. The first perspective is essentialism, which views the Revolution as a glorious battle for freedom and emphasizes British tyranny, that the Revolution was about taxation without representation, colonial unity against the tyranny of the British Empire, which means that dissenting voices are typically ignored. Loyalists, religious pacifists, the frontiersmen who had little to gain through going to war with Britain, slaves, and Native Americans are typically left out of the narrative. Essentialism also emphasizes the superiority and moral objectivity of the Founding Fathers, and the morality of the revolutionary cause. You will often hear phrases such as God's plan or God's chosen people and city upon a hill, which emphasizes the uniqueness of America and its distance from Europe and the rest of the world. Second is Organticism, which views the American Revolution as a successful divorce from the British Empire, culminating in the creation of a new nation. However, Organticists believe that ideologically, the revolution is incomplete, that certain groups were excluded from the phrase, all people created equal, and that they are still fighting for inclusion even today. This perspective emphasizes the untold narratives of groups that left fewer written historical records, such as African Americans, women, Native Americans, and Loyalists. Often, organicists reinterpret commonly accepted narratives of the American Revolution. They look at economic interpretations, the Founding Fathers' relationship to slavery, and the role of African Americans in the Revolution. Proponents of the essentialist perspective believe that diligent, unbiased historical study will lead to a conclusive, irrefutable truth, whereas the organticists believe that truth is relative, and that there may be multiple interpretations of truth. They also believe that historical interpretations are constantly evolving. Neither one of these paradigms is wrong, and neither one is more accurate than the other, but it is good to acknowledge the existence of both perspectives so that as students, we can better understand and analyze the information we are presented with. Now I would like to give two examples, one of essentialism and one of organicism. In the following examples, we will be looking for the portrayal of events leading up to the signing of the Constitution and the Revolution. Why did the colonists revolt? Were their motives economic, political, or ideological? Who was included in the narrative? Depiction of the Founding Fathers. Are they portrayed as imperfect people or as demigods with special insight? And finally, definition of American values. What makes American people unique? I will be using the musical Hamilton for my agranticist example. The groundbreaking hip-hop musical about the life of founding father Alexander Hamilton, written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, debuted last year and swept the Tonys with a groundbreaking 16 nominations, winning 11 of the areas it was nominated for. Besides the outrageous lines and lottery ticket system, there are Hamilton YouTubers, merchandise, fan art, and memes. Miranda was even recognized by the President of the United States. So what makes Miranda's narration different? Well, in an interview with Rolling Stone, Miranda talks about claiming the right to tell the often exclusive American creation myth through a multicultural cast. He also says that portraying the Founding Fathers as demigods, covering up their flaws, detracts from their greatest achievement, a mostly peaceful transition from anarchic revolution to democratic government. I really don't accept the premise that we lionize any of these dudes. I think our goal is to present them as human. So here are 3 aspects of the show that most closely align Hamilton's narrative with an organticist paradigm. The cast. Casting descriptions for Hamilton were intentionally very broad so as to include actors of any race. Miranda wanted the cast to represent what America looks like today, diverse. Also, the women in Hamilton are strong female leads. Each character has her own storyline, motivations, and exhibits agency. Hamilton does not deify the Founding Fathers, who are all shown to be flawed individuals. The show openly acknowledges Hamilton's affair with Maria Reynolds. Washington is depicted as an ineffective general, and it points out the irony that Jefferson could write so eloquently about freedom and yet own 600 slaves. Hamilton also makes it clear that slavery is one of the freedoms the rebels are fighting for. John Lawrence sings, "But we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me." Hamilton questions the traditional narrative. It discusses characters and issues that have often been ignored, offering a compelling depiction of the founding of the country. Hamilton's America is one of imperfect, diverse people who come together to create something bigger than themselves. For my essentialist example, I will be using Walt Disney World and Epcot. This may seem like a strange choice, but I believe a relevant and important one. First of all, Disney is the epitome of American popular culture. They've made a business out of art, and they are very successful. They are also master storytellers. The parks serve as an immersive experience in which guests can become a part of both new and familiar stories. Not just partake, not just buy merchandise, but to become a part of the story. Also, the parks are visited by millions of guests from all over the world every year. Whatever narrative is presented within the parks is consumed by millions of people. However, it is also important to remember that Disney parks do not represent reality. Historian Richard Francaviglia writes, Disney often replicates essences of historic environments, historic architecture and landscapes, through a complex process of selection and abstraction of landscape features or elements. So Disney's representation of the past is abstract and stylized. Disney represents an idealized America, America as it should be, or as we wish it could be, free from conflict. But I'll let Walt tell you about Epcot himself.
The most exciting, the most important part of our Florida project, in fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World, will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow. We call it Epcot, spelled E-P-C-O-T, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Here it is in larger scale. Epcot will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise. I don't believe there's a challenge anywhere in the world that's more important to people everywhere than finding solutions to the problems of our cities. But where do we begin? How do we start answering this great challenge? Well, we're convinced we must start with the public need. And the need is not just for curing the old ills of old cities. We think the need is for starting from scratch on virgin land and building a special kind of new community. So that's what Epcot is, an experimental prototype community that will always be in a state of becoming.
This is a model of Epcot that Walt built himself. Epcot is broken into two sections. The front of the park, Future World, is devoted to scientific and technological advances. The back of the park is called World Showcase. There are a dozen countries that line the lagoon in the center. World Showcase was intended to display the world's cultures, promoting greater understanding and tolerance. Cast members in World Showcase are representatives of their home countries, typically college students participating in the Disney College program. They travel to America for a year, during which time they live and study with other cast members from all over the world. So in a sense, Walt's dream of providing a model for the world, of creating a new and unique community, of disseminating American culture and values to other nations, that dream has been achieved in World Showcase, but not in the way that he pictured it. The pavilions in World Showcase offer a taste of culture: architecture, landscape, food, music, dance, and merchandise. Several of the pavilions include a brief video, which functions as a promo for the nation, usually focusing on the landscape. Look how beautiful it is here, come and visit. Canada, France, and China all utilize CinemaScope, a 360-degree screen. Mexico has a water ride featuring Donald Duck, and in Norway, families can set sail on a Viking ship. And then there's the American Pavilion, located in the center of Epcot World. And this makes sense, considering Walt's original dream of disseminating American culture, of proving American exceptionalism, of solving the world problems. First, guests enter a massive hall, where they can pursue the different historical exhibits and listen to the Liberty Singers perform patriotic favorites. After they travel upstairs under a sea of American flags, they emerge upstairs in a giant hall lined with statues representing the American spirit. Unlike the other films, The American Adventure is a 20-minute show combining lasers, animatronics, video, pyrotechnics, and an epic original soundtrack. Yes, Disney believes in multiculturalism, but they also believe in American exceptionalism. Told through song coupled with historic imagery and narrated by both Mark Twain and Benjamin Franklin, the show tells the story of America from the Declaration of Independence to the present. Let's watch a few minutes.
America did not exist. 4 centuries of work, bloodshed, loneliness, and fear created this land. We built America, and the process made us Americans. A new breed, rooted in all races, stained and tinted with all colors, a seeming ethnic anarchy. Then, in a little time, we became more alike than we were different. A new society. Not great, but fitted by our very faults for greatness.
So here Franklin is emphasizing the unity of Americans. And he's hearkening back to an idea of Frederick Jackson Turner and his frontier thesis, that Americans went through this process of settling the frontier, and during this process, they developed the American character, American democracy, and the process also unified the country as a whole.
In the decades that followed, a new challenge began to emerge. We were growing more and more apart from the mother country. Passion began to govern, and she never governs wisely.
Ah! The British think it's fools we be. If they tax our trade, then our land be next, and soon all else be possessed.
In the decades that followed, a new challenge began to emerge. We were growing more and more apart from the mother country. Passion began to govern, and she never governs wisely.
Ah! The British think it's fools we be. If they tax our trade, then our land be next.
So here we have examples of both the loyalist viewpoint and the patriot viewpoint, which is rather unusual in essentialist perspective. But we also know that the filmmakers are focusing almost exclusively on the economic motivators of the revolution. They're focusing on taxation and tyranny of Britain, which is very typical of an essentialist perspective.
Finally, the time had come to speak with one voice in a declaration of independence. Good evening, Mr. Jefferson. Have you finished the new draft yet?
Those are new drafts all over the floor, Dr. Franklin. It seems one stroke of this pen brings 2 changes from Congress. I told you John Adams should have written this.
Oh, by his own admission, you can write circles around him.
Mr. Adams has not been prisoner in this loft for 17 days. I shall continue tomorrow.
You must continue now. Thomas, it is. Finally, the time had come to speak with one voice in a declaration of independence. Good evening, Mr. Jefferson. Have you finished the new draft yet?
Those are new drafts all over the floor, Dr. Franklin. It seems one stroke of this pen brings 2 changes from Congress. I told you John Adams should have written this.
Oh, by his own admission, you can write circles around him.
Mr. Adams has not been prisoner in this loft for 17 days. I shall continue tomorrow.
You must continue now. Thomas, it is.
In this clip, Benjamin Franklin admits that there is not complete agreement between the 13 colonies, that it's difficult to make 13 clocks chime at once, which is unusual in an essentialist narrative, that they are willing to admit that there wasn't unity at the time of the signing of the Declaration.
I shall spend another night of it.
At least you got shoes, mate. There's not a dozen left what can say that.
Don't tell me, friend. Tell the good general then. Tell him that half his camp has got typhus, smallpox, or dysentery.
And there be not a ration amongst us. Now we can forage for hickory nuts.
Aye, while the English overindulge in our Philadelphia's fine food and drink.
Tis a strange war we shoulder, George Washington. Congress sleeps warmly in York.
And the British party in Philadelphia. I shall spend another night of it.
At least you got shoes, mate. There's not a dozen left what can say that.
Don't tell me, friend. Tell the good general then. Tell him that half his camp has got typhus, smallpox, or dysentery.
And there be not a ration amongst us. Now we can forage for hickory nuts.
Aye, while the English overindulge in our Philadelphia's fine food and drink.
Tis a strange war we shoulder, George Washington. Congress sleeps warmly in York.
And the British party in Philadelphia.
And we freeze or starve to death here.
And so this final clip shows us the deprivation and the sacrifice at Valley Forge. And interestingly enough, the dissatisfaction among the troops. But of course, Washington is there, this slumped figure on horseback, who is there suffering along with his men because a man of his moral character could do no less. But Franklin ends the clip saying that we, the people, have won out. Unity has been achieved, the nation established. We are now free of tyranny and ready to take on the world. So I think what these 2 examples show is that the revolution remains relevant in today's culture. Our shared past informs our present, defining what it means to be an American and what the country should look like.